But ultimately, every deal has risk. A contract is risk. If you want to come to a contract as an attorney and say, I'm going to take all the risk out of it, nobody's going to sign it. You can spend a lot of time doing all that and it'll be beautiful, but nobody will sign it.
Welcome to ALTA Investing Made Easy, where we explore the complex world of alternative assets. I'm Roland, a securities attorney, investment advisor, and your co-host.
And I'm Sarah, an investment advisor and corporate attorney, and your other co-host. We'll guide you through real estate, private equity, and more, making complex topics accessible.
Tune in for insights that empower your financial journey.
Let's make ALTA investing easy, one episode at a time.
Welcome, everyone, to ALTA Investing Made Easy. Today, we're joined by our law partner, attorney Jason Gorman of Grable Martin PLLC. So in addition to being a Texas board-certified real estate attorney for Grable Martin, Jason also owns 1031 Texas, which provides qualified intermediary services for 1031 exchanges.
Hey, and Jason, welcome to ALTA Investing Made Easy.
Yes, thank you for having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, I'm so thankful for you to be on this podcast and also for you to be law partners with us at Grable Martin. For a long time, we had some attorneys that would practice real estate law, but it was really not something that they were, just like me, have learned it over time and probably just knew enough to be dangerous. But this is actually your dedicated practice area. You're a dedicated real estate attorney. Board certification really means something. And there's not a board certification for securities lawyers, unfortunately, or better or worse, but, it's great to have you on the podcast and 1031 is for sure an important issue. That'll be one of the things that we talk about. What I think, why don't we wait to get into defining specifically what that is? The only other thing I want to note here at the outset is that we're all attorneys on this podcast, and we don't have an attorney-client relationship with our unknown audience members. And so without that attorney-client relationship, please don't rely on this as legal advice. We try to structure this as an educational resource for investors and for issuers of private securities and other people investing in real estate. But everybody's circumstances are unique. And so we would really need to have that specific attorney-client relationship with you before you could rely on any of this as actual legal advice. So, let's move forward.
So Jason, we always like to ask you to introduce yourself to our audience and tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and what led you into the areas that you specialize in today.
All right. Well, my background is actually pretty diverse. I've done a lot of different things in real estate from early in my career, right out of college, working for a developer, doing build outs for an interior office, while I was also helping as an assistant project manager on a large apartment complex. This is in the Washington, D.C. area, so very urban, lots going on. Eventually came back to Cincinnati, Ohio, where I went into business with my family as a builder. And my role in that group was really the sales and project planning side of it. I did that for a number of years, building subdivisions and homes, turned it into a real estate license. And then on to a broker license in Ohio. So I was running my own brokerage. Unfortunately, around 2008, things went a little south in the country, and that kind of put a hit on our fledgling development company at the time. And I kind of reinvented myself and went to law school and decided to get more into the technical side, which is what I liked. What I was doing as a realtor was kind of putting the deals together and the development. And so I kind of took that to the next level and came out with a legal degree and then our certification in Ohio initially, and then shortly followed by Texas, where I always had a feeling I may end up, since I married a Texan years ago, that's inevitable that you'll make your way back to Texas. And we did. And when I got settled down here, I met up with a gentleman named Brad Compier, who is also a colleague of ours at Grable Martin now. And about the last 10 years, we ran a boutique real estate transactional firm here, and then decided for both of us it would be better to merge in with Grable Martin and get a few more resources, and then bring our expertise to Grable Martin as well. So yeah, I've done a lot of roles through the career.
I think that's great. I think clients must really appreciate how not only do you have the legal technical expertise, but you actually know what their lives are like and all the things that they're dealing with on the commercial side, on the practical side. I think in time an attorney does develop that knowledge, but it's a leg up if you already know it, and people must give your clients a lot of comfort.
It's a different perspective, and honestly, some of the best client compliments I ever got were that, well, you actually understand what it's like to do this, like to try to put it together. And I think they referred to that I was the only one that could explain it to them in a way that they understood it. Because I've always felt that, like, I learned the business in a non-legal way. Then I went to law school and I learned all the real legal issues behind all those things I were doing, so I can kind of speak both sides of it. And I've signed.
I noticed.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just noticed that because you helped us out a week or two ago with the matter, and it was like, wow, I fully understand the whole perspective of the issues that we were discussing, right, Roland? Even you were like, that was so clear. I never thought it was that clear.
Oh, yeah, yeah. The distinction, what we learned specifically is that Texas is a non-ALTA state, and there are ALTA states. But Jason, you're the expert. Tell us what that means.
Well, in that conversation, what we were talking about was title insurance. And ironically, my first job out of law school was working with Fidelity National Title out of Cincinnati, Ohio. And, it was a great learning experience because you see a lot of transactions in a very short amount of time. But in the title industry, ALTA is the American Land Title Association. So it's just a national trade group that sets standards. And a lot of states will use those standards. So we would call those ALTA states, meaning they use the forms, the policies, all of that is consistent if you're an ALTA state. Texas, like Texas always is a bit unique and wants to do their own things. So they have the Texas Land Title Association. And it has what I would say are ALTA equivalents to everything. So, people that are out of state will quite often reference ALTA in their contracts, ALTA surveys, ALTA policies. But that's not what they're going to get, whether they reference it or not. It's going to be a Texas land title version. Sometimes people explain that. Sometimes they don't. They just give them the Texas version and never really explain the difference. So, yeah, what we were discussing was the differences in that, and in particular, your client in Alabama, whether or not that was an ALTA to states.
That's really useful information, and I think, Sarah, we've got to get Jason involved in early on in the real estate deals that we work on, because having him as a resource would only be helpful, and then also telling our clients about his specific developer experience and that business background is really great, just like you mentioned.
And actually, it's interesting because I just worked at that deal that you helped us with, just closed, and there were moments when I thought, you know what? Too bad I didn't just ask Jason to take it over. But it was learning, and I think everything's fine because it was a situation where there's a lot of standard documentation that couldn't be changed anyway. But it was really interesting experience, and thought it would be nice to learn alongside you next time.
Yeah, I always find a little bit of explanation of why you're doing something goes a long way. And unfortunately, a lot of attorneys don't explain to their clients what they're doing. Like it's the mystery of, I'm just going to take care of this. But it makes more sense. That's the way I learned. And, somebody explaining it to me, and then next time I won't have to ask if I understand why they did something or why this was important.
Well, it's funny because that's also sort of part of our ethos of ALTA Investing Made Easy, which is that we want to, help explain not just the securities laws and the regulations related to this area, but also, these things, anything that we can that's related to the ALTA investing sort of industry or universe. I personally believe that people can learn almost anything provided somebody can help them learn it in the right way. And in a way that makes sense. And so that's part of what we do, right, Roland, is try to break down these complicated topics and help them be digestible.
Do you think that includes calculus and physics?
Yeah, why not? I mean, if you break it into small enough pieces, I mean, some people aren't inclined for that kind of stuff, but this is what more of the life skills area. Like, as we advocate here, everybody needs to consider going on a wealth building journey just for their own financial security in the future, regardless of who you are. The younger you start that journey, and how far you want to go is completely up to you. But there is some reality that at some point in your life, you'll probably be a person who doesn't want to work anymore, or perhaps is unable. And so when you have, learned all of these things about maintaining your financial wealth and health, then, in that context, I think everybody needs a chance to learn it. Not everybody needs to be a mathematician. We don't want to, take those jobs away from the people that are really good at it. So.
Yeah, no, that for sure is a thing. And I think, I'll make a plug for our law firm. Grable Martin is made up of a lot of attorneys that have this practical experience, that have worked as in-house attorneys. You for sure did that, Sarah, and Jason, you mentioned that as well. And what happens is you wind up rubbing elbows with the people that actually have to put all this stuff into practice. And the thing is we work with really intelligent people, hardworking, innovative, and it maybe didn't go to law school. And so they just need a little help, but they can come up with great ideas. And I think the attorneys at Grable Martin have a good humility to where we really do put ourselves in the client's shoes and try to arm them with the information to really enable them in a way that maybe other attorneys don't. But, well, Jason, could you give us an example maybe of some real estate deals where you've really added value as an attorney?
Well, there's lots of ways in a real estate deal. And unfortunately, a lot of people think real estate deals are always the same. And they're not. There's residential, there's commercial, there's standard forms, there's unique attorney forms. And when you get involved, like my preference is, if I've got a client that's either buying or selling, that talks to me about what they want to do before they do it, because then we can get in, particularly on the buying side, we can talk about their offers and various things. And I know realtors are involved in this, and I like working with realtors. I don't know the market. I don't know what's the appropriate price to offer. I don't pretend to know that. But what I want to do is talk to the client about the structure of their offer. Are there unique contingencies? Can we use a standard form? Does this client fit that? Or do we need to break out into something custom? Can we be creative in the offer in a way that helps get the deal done? So that's, being that I came from development first, I always view myself as as a lawyer, can I help get this deal done while managing my client's risk, making sure they understand it and it's managed. But ultimately, every deal has risk. A contract is risk. If you want to come to a contract as an attorney and say, I'm going to take all the risk out of it, nobody's going to sign it. You can spend a lot of time doing all that and it'll be beautiful, but nobody will sign it. So you have to manage it against the other side as well.
That's really good.
So if you told us how you came into real estate law, but if you could just choose, and what's your favorite kind of work that you do in this industry? I know we will talk about the 1031 exchange business shortly, and other maybe interests that you have in other kinds of activities. But I'm interested to know, because perhaps what a real estate attorney does is complicated, just like what any attorney does. It seems simple when you first think about it, and then you dive in. So what do you prefer? What's your favorite deal?
My bread and butter is really just the pure transaction, the buying and selling of it. There's so many little niches in real estate. Everyone puts a broad category over it, but you could be an attorney that specializes in the more of the construction side and entitlements, and you deal with municipalities and zoning and those kind of issues. Or you could be where I am, which falls a little more before that, when somebody's trying to buy that land and they're kind of bridging the gap maybe between what was a homeowner or landowner and what's now going to be a business commercial deal. And, sometimes the two sides are not, coming from the same point of view on things. And that's where I feel like I can get in there and add a lot of value to those buying situations. Yeah. Now, and that's, I've got a lot of clients that are doing that, so maybe that's where I've fallen into that. Yeah, I like that part of it, and then getting it done and getting everything kicked off for what's going to be this new subdivision or new residential development or commercial development.
So, Jason, I mean, one of the areas that I've always been really careful of is ground up development deals, and we haven't worked on a lot of those. Primarily, we represent on the finance deals people that are buying an existing property, and they're not changing it so materially that you would have to take into account, some of these entitlement issues. But I always imagine this ground up development client coming to me and saying, I've got a piece of property, a vacant lot in the middle of Austin, and it's right next door to the church, and the other side is a school, and I want to put a liquor store there. And can I do it according to all the zoning rules and everything? Is that the kind of question that you could answer?
Yes and no. It's if I did the research on it, I'm sure I could, but that's actually where I would probably look where they're building. And you mentioned City of Austin, just an example. City of Austin is notoriously difficult to do those things in, and there are some companies, law firms / consultants that specializes in entitlements, because there's so much about knowing the exact system and who to go through and being able to plan that out, that a lot of folks use those companies as consultants, or even what they would call an expediter, to try to get it done quicker. And it's not exactly a legal service. It's more consulting. Sometimes there's an attorney. So I feel those people, if you're talking about City of Austin, would be a better place to ask. Now, more rural areas, definitely will help people understand, what the county regulations are. Maybe there's a municipality involved. How do they get water? How do they get electric? And go through that for sure.
Roland, isn't it interesting? Because we talk about here, how there is a need for experts when you're dealing with, especially with commercial real estate, and how, sometimes people just don't know that they need an expert, and they end up with someone who doesn't intend to guide them wrong, but maybe ends up guiding them poorly in what they need to be doing. And so part of what our other, goal is here with this webcast is to just put the information out there so people would know that they're entitlement experts. So that's really great to hear, because of course, I think even with entitlements, it can start off seeming simple, like you're saying in the rural example, where it is probably a little bit more simple. And then you get pretty far down the track, you invest in your development plans, et cetera. And then you find out that you're someplace more like the City of Austin, and you actually have problems. And I actually know of a situation that's actually not a client, but it's a family friend who encountered this in Austin, and ran into some very difficult problems that were, again, not helping anything, because the project was a whole bunch of student housing that was going to get built, that was going to be nice and environmentally friendly and all this stuff. So it was an interesting situation where he found out afterwards that he needed this consulting service. And so this is great information for our audience.
Yeah, that's a classic example, is that people learn when they start asking all those questions, how many levels of detail there are within, say, the City of Austin and other major, and that by not knowing that, they cost themselves time, and that's where up front could have laid out maybe a realistic timeline, and I'll probably do better in achieving it than you would on your own.
Exactly.
People, they know the right people to talk to and the right times to do things and get it pushed through as quick as possible.
Yeah, makes sense.
Well, that's good. Well, should we move on to the 1031 discussion?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay. Well, everybody, we've had one prior episode. I think at the time that we published this, we'll have talked to, or have published our prior episode with Jason Gorman, where we talked a little bit about 1031. But just to remind everybody that 1031 the number refers to a section number of the Internal Revenue Code of 1986. And this is the primary statute that governs federal income tax and other kinds of tax in the U.S. And what this allows for is if you invest in real estate, you can sell that real estate and then reinvest in another parcel piece of real estate in what's known as a like-kind exchange. And if you do that within 180 days and follow some other requirements that Jason will inform us about, then you can avoid paying tax on the initial sale. And so what this allows you to do is to continue to defer taxation almost indefinitely, theoretically, just so long as, when you're selling the real estate, you reinvest in other real estate. One thing I'll mention, I looked this up, I did the research this morning, specifically 1031 excludes like-kind exchanges for securities. So this is one of the areas that comes up for us all the time. One of our clients will show up with a pitch deck and they'll be talking about a syndication of LLC membership interests, and they'll say 1031 eligible, and we have to quickly dispel them that there's a way to do it to make this the investment eligible for 1031 funds, but it's not through the syndication, because the securities that you buy in a syndication are not like kind to the real estate. So, Jason, how did you get into the 1031 space originally?
Very, very organically, in the sense that we were operating here as a transactional law firm. So I have clients that were doing them. My partner in the law firm at the time, a gentleman named Brad Compier, also owns a title companies, which we do office together with. So I have kind of back-end exposure to the inner workings of a title company here. We saw how many times people would be within days of closing, and they would ask their escrow officer to oh, I want to do this as a 1031, expecting the title company that was a service that they offered. And, title companies always want to have good customer response. So they had a common referral they would give out. And it just came to our attention that that's a service we could provide as a separate company, and how often it was in need. And we, as attorneys, we looked into it, we understood it. We knew that the two sides of the every deal is to sell something and to buy something, deal with closings. This is all things that we were doing naturally. So we just, added this as an additional company within our services suite and started doing it.
That's really great. Well, maybe you could describe for us at a high level the requirements for a 1031 exchange, because I mentioned the 180 days, but there's some others as well.
Yeah, the basic highest level requirements are you have to currently own a property that qualifies. So in the exact sense, that would be property that has been held for business or for investment. So operating businesses that own their lands, and they're going to maybe move locations, like relocate somewhere else, that's eligible. But probably the more common thing that we see is the investment property. So your classic rental property, anything income producing, houses, retail, commercial, even land, if it's parking lots or food trucks or whatever you're doing with vacant land. And since we are in Texas, a lot of farms and ranches, they either qualify technically as a business, or maybe you're leasing to a farmer that is doing some sort of agricultural operation there. But the fact that you're leasing can make your land an investment property as well. So you have to have that, and you have to ultimately buy something that meets that same qualification of how you're going to use it. So that's your relinquished property and your replacement. You always have to start with something you're going to relinquish. You have to buy a replacement, which that goes to the point you were making about the securities. That's why 1031 money, if I sell property, but I invest in a syndication, that's not like kind. I didn't buy a property in that sense. Even though I kind of made a real estate investment, I did it in a way where I'm not the actual owner of the property. So that's where, we have to always end an exchange with a new property that they didn't currently own. There's a 180-day time limit from the day they sell to when they got to get everything bought. And then there's an internal 45-day, what they call an identification period, where if you've sold, you started your clock, and if you haven't bought something within 45 days and you want to keep the option open, you have to write down properties on a list and sign off on them. That basically is a choice to keep the exchange open, but now as to only these properties on the list. So that'll give you the remainder of the time to try to get them closed.
And so what's the role of a qualified intermediary?
Okay, so in that, the IRS has, when they came up with this 180-day concept, that was back in the 70s. Prior to that, people actually had to direct exchange property and then tell the IRS what they did. Then they came up with this idea of, all right, well, let's put this gap in here and we'll put a middleman in there that kind of handles it. That became the role of the qualified intermediary. One of the key tenets of the law is that the sellers or the exchangers can't receive these funds and get personal use out of them. So the funds from a sale, the exchange funds anyways, can get directed to a QI who holds them safely and waits for them to be redeployed into whatever is purchased. And so we kind of administer what the IRS has set up as these rules, the time limits, the limiting the access to the funds. By using a qualified intermediary, the IRS says that's a safe harbor provision, that they presume that everything was done correctly. So when you file your taxes, you could fall under that safe harbor. You don't have to prove to them that you didn't access the funds because you used a qualified intermediary and you signed a contract that matched all the terms.
That's good to know. And it's a service that's really important that people educate themselves about ahead of time, because we hear so many horror stories about people showing up to closing, just kind of assuming that it works in a particular way. And they wind up having much different tax results than they expected. So just the more education about this area, I think the better, and having you as a resource to answer all the tough questions will be, really wonderful for us to have. Both as
I could offer the worst phone call that I get is the person that calls me very excited because they closed their property yesterday and they're ready to do their exchange now and they want to tell me all about it. And unfortunately, if they are calling me after they've closed and they've got their money, there's absolutely nothing we can do. They missed it. We have to be in front of the sale. We have to intercept the funds before it gets to them. And I've had that call numerous times, and people go from very excited because they had it all planned out, but they didn't actually contact somebody. Maybe they read something, maybe they know a lot of things, but they missed that detail that we had to be ahead of, as opposed to they can't give us the money after they've gotten it. Yeah.
That makes sense.
That is the worst.
I've got a couple. I can only imagine. I've got two questions for you. The first one is just, we have a lot of clients who maybe have interests abroad also. Is the investment property that is the property that you sell, you had a word for it, is the relinquished property, does that have to be within the United States or can it be abroad?
If you can do it in an exchange, a domestic exchange, so sold U.S. property, and buy U.S. property, or you can do a foreign exchange, both international, but you can't cross the two. You can't.
Oh, interesting.
Okay. Country or vice versa.
Okay.
And but interestingly,
okay. And then other taxes would apply to that too. But so that might be actually, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. That might be actually a pretty complicated question, but I just thought that's the point is it's something else to consider if people might have properties. For example, a lot of people buy these homes in Mexico, right, to do Airbnb or have a summer house that they rent out also. I suppose that might be potentially an example of something like an investment property.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the question that I've gotten before about that. I will admit that I've not done an international exchange, and if somebody came to me with that, I would probably push them to somebody more familiar with international real estate.
Those people can be hard to find.
From a 31 perspective, I absolutely know the answer is you can't cross borders, basically.
Yeah, that's interesting. That makes sense. At least it's a defined line, right? And then the second question I had for you is, kind of we're assuming we're talking about 1031 exchange in the context of commercial real estate or investment real estate. And I'm saying that very vaguely, not precisely the way that you've defined it before. But also we've talked about with other people about the mineral estate and how there's certain things about mineral estates that can be dealt with through 1031 exchanges. Is that something that you prefer to pass to other people, or is that something you also have expertise in?
Well, in the sense that when they're going to do a sale of mineral interests, so minerals can be severed from the surface, to say. And in Texas, they recognize those still as both real estate components of real estate. And as long as it's a component of real estate, it can be exchanged. So you could go between a surface estate and put your money into minerals, or sell minerals and put it back into let's call it surface real estate, because they're both within that umbrella of real estate in Texas. And actually the IRS does yield to whatever state law is on determining what is real estate. So any of those sort of fine line issues about maybe mobile homes, whether they're attached or detached, those kind of little fine areas would be state law specific, but as long as it's recognized in that state as real estate, then it can be exchanged, which is and minerals also sometimes can get used very generically. We're talking about the actual rights to the minerals. There can be some more peripheral royalties and things that come out of it that aren't necessarily exchangeable. So, and there are companies that they don't specialize necessarily in the exchange part of it, but the buying and selling. There's mineral brokers out there that are very familiar with that and can help guide and make sure that you're buying something that is exchangeable. But ultimately, the QI you use could get plugged in regardless. And I have done mineral exchanges.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that's really good to know, isn't it, Roland? Because we're starting to have a lot more discussion about oil and gas as an asset class, as an alternative asset class. And of course, there are other tax benefits that go along with that. But it's good that there's the 1030 potentially, depending on the very fine detail, potential for a 1031 exchange benefit from that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it goes with water and wind and some of the rights and whether they're being considered real estate or not. And
that is interesting. See, hot topics in 1031 exchanges. Is water real estate? It maybe should be. I don't know. So.
Yeah, it's an interesting one.
Well, it just sounds like the key takeaway is that if you are knowledgeable enough about 1031 to be excited about the sale of your property, make sure you call Jason before you sell the property, and give a shout out to Hobbs Allison Hobbs, right?
That's correct. He's our business development officer, Allison.
Yeah, Hobbs is our friend from a real estate meetup that Sarah and I attend pretty regularly, and we knew Hobbs for a long time, even before Jason joined our firm, and then found out of that relationship. So I think that's really awesome. So we definitely have a 1031 exchange company that we can recommend to all our clients, and we can put them in touch with Hobbs and Jason.
Yeah,
so, it's really great.
Well, Jason, anything else? We want to really leave this open. Anything else that you would want to bring up? One of the things that I know we always like to talk about are, your personal life. We don't want to be intrusive in any way, but one of the things that I think attorneys need to be aware of, and investment advisors for sure, is the personal circumstances of their clients' lives. And finding out the why behind what they do. Why is it important for you to build wealth? Why is it important for you to engage in this real estate transaction? And so, finding out more about you personally to the extent that you want to tell us about that, we would love to hear it.
Yeah. So obviously my goal is to raise my kids, get them through college, and then have enough money left over to not have to have them support me in the late.
Well, Sarah and I can relate to that greatly.
Yeah,
that's
sure.
my minimum, and then hopefully I have enough to be able to go do some things and then enjoy myself. So I'm married with two girls that are about to graduate, a senior and a junior. So yeah, that college topic is very hot right now.
It's a hot topic.
But ironically, there is a funny story about me being a 1031 person now. Is I mentioned earlier that I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, and that's where I did a lot of my development work. And so I had built from the ground up a 5-unit townhome project. Actually, my brother and I built it, and then later I bought him out and ran it for about 8 or 9 years. And then when I was coming to Texas, so after law school, and I'm now a practicing attorney, I kept it for a little while after we moved, but found it just a little too difficult to manage from away. Decided to sell it, and I did not do a 1031 exchange with it. At the time, I just, we had moved, and I was doing some other things, and I had some other uses for the funds that I made. But in hindsight, had I forced myself to do a 1031 and put it back into real estate, I would have bought something in Austin, Texas in 2014. And at the time, I didn't know what I would buy because it all felt a little expensive to me because I was new. I didn't, the relative values of things wasn't sort of soaked in yet. But in hindsight, it wouldn't have mattered what I bought. I could have bought the worst possible thing out there, and it would have made money because that was just such an incredible span. But in the end, I sold it. I paid a bunch of taxes, and I did something with the money. That was fine, but not nearly as good as had I put it back into real estate and taken that advantage. So I do find it ironic that I got into this business after that, and I wish somebody would have told me back then.
How many people say that about Austin real estate?
Yeah. Yeah, there's two components: the Austin real estate, but even the 1031. When I saw my tax,
yeah, for sure.
Wow, that just really caught up with me there. I did not get as much as I thought I was a good kid.
Well, Jason, one conversation we had was about the way to use 1031 money in connection with the syndication. We can't invest directly in the syndication, sell the real estate and buy a LLC membership interest. But there is a way to structure, replicate the economics in a tenant in common relationship. Then also there's something called a Delaware statutory trust, and there are reasons why that doesn't work as well for syndications. But do you have any experience with the using the 1031 exchange funds alongside a syndication?
Yeah, absolutely. So the issue you have to overcome there is that whoever's has the 1031 money that they're trying to buy replacement property with, they have to be on title. So if you got a syndication that sort of has a deal they're putting together, in order to take that 1031 money in, they don't take it into the syndication, but they can work sort of in parallel with them. So maybe that syndication takes 90% of the deal and they have a 10% investor parallel to them that is 1031 money, or three or four of them that are, 2.5% each, whatever it works out to. So they can do that. They're on title. They're basically the same as the syndication. And that would usually get tied together by something, an asset management agreement, I think is the most common name I've seen used for that. And it's just a contractual agreement of how these co-owners are going to manage and operate this property. Because the syndication, of course, they have all their details in there for their investors, but now we're talking about a parallel relationship, and usually the syndicator kind of runs that asset management group. So they're above it in a contractual sense. They control it, and that's how it can be done. So a little added setup to it, which is, I'm sure what you guys would put together in there, but it absolutely can be done if it's set up in advance.
Yeah, I always like when clients ask about this, honestly, because it basically, for a syndication, there's a cost associated with doing that, the legal work. But when we do incorporate a tenancy in common relationship, it basically doubles the legal fees. And so I tell clients, listen, don't do this necessarily for somebody that's just looking to invest a relatively small amount, but do it for somebody that's wanting to put in maybe $250 to where it justifies doubling the legal cost for the syndication. And this is something that we for sure can help with in our law practice. And then now I'm just so excited that we have you as a resource, not only to help us put together the real estate deal, but also to handle the 1031 exchange. And then, now we can really go all the way through with people and tell them that, hey, if you do have this 1031 money, there is a way to invest or create a syndication or invest alongside a syndication and replicate those economics, for the deal sponsor and for the person investing as well. So, we're really excited to have you on the team.
Yeah, Jason, we've said it many times, but there's a reason for it. Like, obviously doing the securities work and the syndication work alongside these commercial real estate deals, we need your expertise. But also I think it's, just like what you're saying with the 1031 money, Roland, don't we also have this where if you want to incorporate 1031 money into your syndication, you need to do it. You need to let us know in advance, because reincorporating it at the last minute is kind of difficult. Right?
Yeah, it's always helpful to know, and then it's just like what you were saying, Jason. For all our clients, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? I think we've all heard that before, but call us ahead of time. I think good attorneys aren't going to nickel and dime you on the every single phone call. We do that's really all we have to sell right now is our time, but at the same time, we want to be involved in the transaction as early as reasonably possible, because there really are ways for us to help you, help our clients add value, and really it's just the earlier the better. That's the lesson from the 1031 exchange issue, and then also just legal issues for real estate or the syndications, the securities, private securities deals that Sarah and I work on. So anyway, it's good to be able to say that and have so many concrete examples of why that's true.
Yeah, I think anyone that's doing syndications on a consistent basis should know the answer to that question when an investor comes to them and says, I have X amount of 1031 money. They shouldn't be making the decision based on that specific fact circumstance, but in general, is this something we will consider? Is there a minimum amount that would make it something we could consider? And do we know, if we say yes, what it takes to get it done? If they've answered all those questions, then you can just apply the facts and the exact scenario to it, but they've already thought through the process. That's the conversation that I would have with anybody doing a syndication. And maybe the answer is no, it's not a big enough deal, or where we don't need this, but at least they've thought it through without sort of this pressure of time or maybe, some deadline coming up.
Because I think one important thing to remember, if the tenant in common does go on title, then they're probably, there's any financing involved, they're going to have to sign on the loan.
Yeah.
And that's something the 1031 people coming in have to recognize too, is this isn't a normal investment. You're doing it because you want this advantage of the 1031. It requires you to operate a little differently. You're in there a little more directly than you would be in a syndication investment.
Exactly. So there's always a push and pull. I had heard from one of our, can't remember which, it was one of the people that we interviewed that we work with sometimes. And he was saying too, that you also need to look at the deal, sort of the deal economics, because of the demand perhaps for 1031 money. It can be that actually that syndicated deal, maybe has a little bit lower pricing for everybody, a little bit. So it's kind of interesting if you don't want to be a 1031 exchange, and there are a bunch of other 1031. It's just another thing to consider with your investment advisor and take advice on if you're investing in those kinds of deals, whether your 1031 money is getting the same kinds of returns as non-1031 money would get.
Yeah, and it could go either way. There's people that have, sponsors, I should say, that they forego the syndication model and they just go straight tenants in common model. And so they're not doubling up in two different structures, but they're limiting themselves to investors with 1031. Well, they're not technically limiting, but most of the people that would go that route, it would be because of 1031. There is an avenue, if they've got those investors and those people doing it, that might be another way to do it. If fill the whole deal out with 1031 money and not syndicate.
Yeah, that's true. We probably wouldn't hear about those deals so much, would we, Roland? The ones that never consider actually the sort of the, if you look at that as a property transaction instead of a securities offering, basically, I guess is the line question.
The one thing to remember, I'm shaking my pen in the air. The offer of the tenancy in common interests itself is an offer of securities. So
that's what I was going to say. I think it's really just swapping out one for another, because if you're doing the whole project that way, you're going to be getting into those same issues. You're just doing it in a different structure. The couple of times I've run into that, usually the sponsor, they had a major chunk of their own money in it. So they might have been the 50 or 60 partner and they were filling out another 30 or 40%, not in a syndication because they knew they wanted to 1031. It was really them just adding money to the pot of what they were doing.
And that therein comes the question of, are you offering securities, right?
Yeah, and they had a very elaborate setup, asset management agreements and all that. And so I think they had talked to folks like yourself and decided this is the way they wanted to do their development. It was doing traditional syndication.
Well, for sure. I mean, it's an area that we have expertise in, not only with respect to the securities offering, but the 1031 aspects of it and, setting up a tenant in common. So, everybody out there that wants more information about this, please, feel free to call us because, we're happy to talk with you about it and address the specific circumstances that might be coming up for you. Well, anything else? Have we missed anything that we wanted to talk about?
Jason, if you have some other topics, we can, or key takeaways, we could talk about those, or otherwise it could be a natural place to stop.
I could talk about 1031s all day, so not getting more and more detailed. So I don't know if you're ready to go down the rabbit hole of all the what if scenarios, but I think covered it.
Didn't you say that there's a conference you present at? And I don't know if that's in the context of your real estate practice or your 1031 exchange business, but sometime in April, you and Brad were telling us about, I think it's a conference that
we attend a lot of conferences, some of them just as sales. We go to various investor conferences to be a sponsor with our QI business. We education conferences. We're a member of a group called the Federation of Exchange Accommodators, FEA, and that's the only national trade group that kind of oversees qualified intermediaries. And it's an interesting business in the sense that I will say it's not regulated in most states. So it can be a little bit of the Wild West on who your qualified intermediary is. There's everything from very large companies to companies more like us, but you need to do some research and make sure they are qualified. I hold a certification from FEA called a certified exchange specialist, which means I validated that I've been working in this industry for, I believe it was 3 years before I even qualified to then sit for a test. And it was a very in-depth test on IRS regulations, all the what if scenarios, and just validating that, we're knowledgeable in our expertise. Also, next component of it. So knowing that we're doing right by our clients, how we're holding the money, and we're doing various things there. So it's a credential that I would recommend anybody doing a 1031. If you're not using us, definitely look for somebody that's a member of the FEA, and particularly that has a CIS designation from the FEA. That's a specific person that will give you a qualification level, and it's really the only one you can point to.
Yeah, sometimes these certifications are really meaningful, and that would be meaningful for me. And then the fact that you're board certified in real estate law, that is meaningful to me as well. So it's so great to get to know more about you and your practice, Jason. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I think, you know what? I think we should maybe have another time that we record maybe and get more in depth into 1031s, because it sounds like there are lots of interesting topics. And so maybe since we've had a nice long chat today, we could do it another time. But it does open up. I think it opens up the conversation. I think I would like to understand a lot more. Yeah. So we'll see maybe how that goes. Maybe next year if you're available, Jason.
Yeah, it's the most complex, simple topic I've ever discussed. High level, it is very simple. You sell, you buy, you do a couple things in the middle. But there's so many, well, what about this? Well, what about this? What if this happens or that happens? And, yeah, always.
That's funny.
Well, that's great. Well, again, thank you, Jason. And that seems to be a natural place for us to stop. I think that we've addressed a topic today that is useful knowledge both for investors and for sponsors and managers of real estate deals. We hope it's given you food for thought when you think about investing in this important class of alternative assets, and that important subclass is real estate. So again, Jason, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jason. And thank you for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video podcast, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel.
And remember, everyone, take aim with your alternative investing strategies.
See you next time.